Nintendo Switch 2 has dominated the Japanese sales charts. Let's see, Mario Kart World, Momotaro Densetsu 2, let's see, Pokemon Legends ZA, Kirby Air Riders, Bonanza, Jamboree, yeah, New Horizons update, yep, Minecraft. So yeah, the idea, the narrative that Nintendo Switch 2 is doing poorly, that Japanese shareholders are losing faith in the company, it is complete nonsense. There's a reason why Nintendine and people like him don't ever want to bring up Japanese sales, which, by the way, is the most important market. It's because Nintendo is so dominant there. You know, they don't want to talk about how badly the Switch is like destroying the PS5. They don't want to talk about the sales of all the first-party Nintendo games. They want to just plug their ears and pretend that like the UK market matters. You know, like this is the reality of what we're seeing this year is that the Nintendo Switch 2 is dominating. It's not going to dominate. It's not like the glory years are not behind it. You know, it is dominating now. It is dominating in the future. It dominated in the past. It's like, if Sony were to send a robot back in time to like, kill the Nintendo Switch 2, like that would be killed too. Cuz even Sony, like, 20 years from now, with their technological advancements, with their games, with their consoles, even if they could send a console back in time to compete with the Nintendo Switch 2, like, that's not going to do shit. That's not going to compete with what Nintendo has. It is downright embarrassing to see where we're at right now in this ecosystem where like Nintendo is clearly dominating. They're like all of their games have been major hits, and yet like the Nintendo YouTuber community like still desperately are trying to downplay everything that comes out, whether it's like Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, whether it's Kirby Air Riders, whether it's Metroid Prime 4. According to these people, like nothing good has come out. And now you have like idiots like Angry Joe like trying to like wave his tiny dick around, like saying that like, oh, look at me, Sonic Racing Cross Worlds is way better than Mario Kart World. See, it's on my top 10 list. And then you actually look at his top 10 list, and like, first of all, the list is garbage. It's filled with like the absolute most normie slop imaginable. Like it's like, a couple of game of the year bait contenders, like nothing but absolute slop. But then you look at the numbers, okay? He has, no joke, something like half the views that he got for like his last top 10 video. Like his views have taken a massive dip over the past several years. And I do think it is entirely due to this nonsense of like favoring the sponsors over the people who actually make the good games. So like people like, Maximilian Dude or like Angry Joe are being sponsored by companies to say things like, oh yeah, Street Fighter, it's way better than Super Smash Bros. Like, oh, I sure do love Final Fantasy 16 and 7. Like, you get these situations where these guys come out and they start glazing all these games that they would never actually play. Maximilian Dude with Final Fantasy 7R, Angry Joe with Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, and numerous others. Like, they come out and glaze this, like, nonsense because, they're influencers. What do you think their job actually is? It's not to produce video content and to review shit because, Angry Joe definitely doesn't do that. But, like, it is to sell you on the idea that products like Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, which is objectively inferior to Mario Kart World in every single way, shape, and form, something that like is a complete disaster. The Sonic brand is a dead IP. Nobody talks about it. Nobody like a lesser project like Sonic Racing Cross Worlds can somehow compete with Mario Kart World and Kirby Air Riders. Kirby Air Riders, by the way, also outperforms Sonic Racing Cross Worlds. So Sonic Racing Cross Worlds isn't even the second best racer this year. Honestly, it's just it's so inexplicable, how this keeps happening. Where Nintendo dominates the industry, they destroy the competition, in like every single way, shape, and form, and people bend over backwards to kind of deny it. It's like going against their religion. Honestly, it's very much like the core essence of who they are as individuals, where like they only play the same games, they only talk about the same things, they are desperate for like mid like irrelevant franchises like Warhammer 40K to be popular and to be taken seriously. You know, they keep going bending over backwards to like talk about like things like James Cameron's Avatar and like Marvel slop, and like there's just this very stubborn refusal to acknowledge that like Nintendo's bigger than all of that now. You know, that like it's only a matter of time, I think, until we see like the Legend of Zelda like surpass the Lord of the Rings in relevancy. It's only a matter of time until we see like more Nintendo IPs start shooting up like the most profitable list. You know, Splatoon, I think, is a really blatant example of that. Something that's going to be popular worldwide at some point. It's just a matter of when and how that happens. Like, it is going to be crazy seeing like how the industry tries to like downplay all these Nintendo games, because that's all we're seeing now is just like all these guys coming out and like crying about Nintendo, you know, trying to downplay these games, saying they're not as good as other games that come out. And the reality is that that's not true at all, and that becomes more and more apparent over time. Like this time or this year, nobody is going to remember Sonic Racing Crossroads even came out. You know, like nobody even remembers it exists, and it's like it's so unbelievably sad how the community tried to make it a meme. You know, Claire Obscure Expedition 33. You know, obviously a sponsored product. You know, obviously that someone put like millions of dollars into to try and make popular and successful. You know, it was mocked by like dozens of better Nintendo RPGs. You know. Like, that's not a game that anyone's going to remember 5 years from now. You know, just like Cyberpunk 2077, just like, Ghost of Tsushima, like, just like Horizon Zero Dawn. It's like, once the hype period for this game is done, once the money dries up, you're never going to hear these people talk about it again. And that's a big reason why I think, like, the AAA, like, influencer sphere is, like, doomed to fail. Okay, because they can't hide the numbers, they can't hide the reality of the situation, they can't hide the fact that these games are genuinely fun, right? They have to keep trying to bamboozle people as much as possible into thinking that Nintendo is failing and on the way out, but in actuality, it is their favorite brands that's on the way out. You know, Marvel is dying, Warhammer will die a death, James Cameron's Avatar is done, and there's just this refusal to admit what the next big thing is going to be. That is going to be Nintendo. You know, it is going to dominate the film industry. It is going to dominate comic books. It is going to dominate, like, you know, merchandising and, like, everything. In a lot of ways, it already is. But yet, the entire giant cope about this is that it's not true. And this is something that we really have to acknowledge as just being a gigantic cope. Nintendo is successful, and there is nothing you can do to stop them.